All right, Cesar, what's going on, man?
Hey, it's going well, man.
Cool.
Weather's
So,
getting better over
what's
here.
that?
So weather's getting better here in Salt Lake.
Yeah. It's Ohio's getting nice too. But thanks for joining me today. So, I'm excited to get in and talk about you and your background, and kind of what you started with in your fat loss journey, and really hope that people who are listening to this or watching this can take a lot of what you've kind of learned throughout the process, the mindset changes, all that. Uh, to make better impactful moves in their own life. So tell us a little bit, I guess, about kind of your beginning in fitness in terms of working out. What was kind of your background?
Yeah, so just to give you my life journey. So I grew up playing sports, specifically baseball, and that's in essence where my fitness journey started. And I'll be honest with you, in the 34 years that I have on this earth, I think there's only been maybe between the age of 18 to 21 was the only year that I didn't struggle with like weight and so forth. So my whole life has definitely been around like fluctuations in weights and educating myself from a physical, like from a working out perspective. But that's where it started. And then I played sports all throughout high school. I also played in college for a Division II school back east. And then post college, I went into finance, and I've been in my current company for about 10 years, well, almost 11 years now. And then I also continued to, work out. That's somewhat stopped and started throughout, but then also still playing baseball as well.
Okay. And then, so let's kind of back up to your athletic days. So when you're doing that, what were your workouts back then? And then kind of how did they change post that to being an adult, having a family and working?
Yeah. So when I started, so going into high school, I didn't hit my growth spurt till really late. So I was this like 5'2", 5'3". I don't remember my weight, but I was definitely pudgy, and fat, you would say. My And to that point, it was all like baseball activities, your old school like calisthenics, cardio, and things like that. There wasn't tons of like weight training then. But my junior year in high school, one of my buddies who ended up playing professional baseball, he started getting ready from a weight training perspective, because he was going to a top Division I school. So we got a personal trainer. So he got a personal trainer, and my dad, made the same investment. So we started lifting weights with a personal trainer. And it was this like private practice in New Jersey. We lived in New York at the time. And that trainer was primarily focused around, working out and things like that. But he also gave us a few tips on dieting. Now it was old school crash diet. Like, you can tell that I wasn't consuming tons of macros because these workouts were extremely hard. But it started there, and it was your prototypical, very beginner types of workouts. You come in, start with dumbbells. So you instead of going right into the barbell for benches, you start with dumbbells and so forth. There was some type of cardio that we would do, but it wouldn't be your traditional like run on a treadmill. It would be, okay, well, you're gonna do some sleds and stuff like that. So that's where I really started lifting weights. And then I lost a bunch of weight, hit my growth spurt. So by the time I got into senior year, I was about 6 feet tall, about 168 pounds. And that's what I went into college. And then when I went into college, it was pretty interesting because I started at a junior, even though I went to a D2 school, I started at a junior college. So the weight program was pretty much assigned to us. We didn't necessarily have like a quote unquote strength coach. But it was very much like general weightlifting, like nothing crazy, and no Olympic lifts or anything like that.
Yeah.
So my first couple of years, it was that plus, eating and, starting to take protein more often. So I went my first couple of years from like 168 pounds to about 186 pounds. That was by the end of my sophomore year. And then my junior year, I then went to college. I went to the University of New Haven. We had a proper strength coach. So then you started building in some more of the Olympic lifts, and more of the complicated things. So by the time I was done with college and I graduated college, I was about 6 feet tall, 202 pounds.
So about 40 pounds or so in a 4-year span.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. And how do you think that was a majority of muscle, or do you think it was a mixture of both?
So it was, I think it was my body was developing obviously, and then muscle. For sure it was muscle. Like I was 200 pounds and I had abs, not maybe a 6-pack, but I had a 4-pack.
Yeah.
I would tell you though, because I grew so fast, I did get hurt a lot in college though. And I don't know if that played a role. Like, I mean, I was a person that was fit, constantly working out. Like I would go to practice for like 4 or 5 hours and then go work out for like an hour or two. So I don't know if my body couldn't keep up with it. So like I had pulled hamstrings, I had a couple of surgeries and so forth. But it was definitely muscle that I had put on over those years. But I think part of that was also my body was starting to mature.
Mm-hmm. So to put on 40 pounds of muscle, that's 10 pounds a year, right? I mean, the rate is great. And obviously you were young. What were the nutrition guidelines or things you were doing? I know you're probably, people at that point are just eat. They're just eat more. Do you have a recollection?
I tell you what, like my dieting was not good. Like it was just eat whatever. And the thing is, the great part about back then is your metabolism is so fast and you're burning so many calories. It doesn't matter if I go to McDonald's and spend $10 in a dollar menu and have like 4 McChickens and burgers and things like that. So I definitely ate a lot for sure, like throughout the day. Now, did I track my food? No. Was it all healthy? Probably not. But I'm sure that having so many calories in a day definitely contributed to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's actually there's a documentary. There's a guy who ate McDonald's for, I think it was either 6 months or a year.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it was a showing that obviously food quality is important, but people think McDonald's is bad. But he had McDonald's for every meal for like either a half a year, but he was controlling calories, and he ended up losing weight. His like blood pressure came down, his cholesterol. It was like every marker of fitness improved, and he was eating McDonald's.
Yeah.
And then you have like the other part. I think there's a trainer who basically just ate fast food and just ballooned a bunch of weight up just to kind of like show that it's bad. But it's at the end of the day, which I think is cool. The conversation we get into is it's like calories. I know it's so like cliche and so straightforward of like, it's really math. Like it comes down to eat more to gain, eat less. And then obviously there's macros, which I think is big. So you get out of college, super muscular, then you hit the real world. What was that first year like, transitioning from working out 6 hours a day, having, top coaches, training, being able to eat whatever, to then work?
Well, man, so look, I go into work and, the company that I work from, I'm working anywhere from 12 to 14 hours a day, right? And this has been from the jump. And it fluctuates, but from the jump, a very competitive company. I'm very grateful for all of the opportunities that I've gotten from it because I've learned a lot. But what I would tell you, what I struggled the most with once I got out of college was getting to the gym. Like I didn't necessarily have a motivation at that point, because my whole life when I started going to the gym, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to the gym so that I can hit the baseball further, and so that I can throw harder, and so that I can run. So I would go into the gym with what I've learned for 5-6 years of weightlifting, and try to program my own kind of workout and so forth. But I struggled, and it was for a long time, it was a struggle for me to consistently go to the gym. Like I would have points where I would go for a few months, and then after a while I would just stop. So it was definitely a struggle right out of college. And it's the main reason why I went from, the 200 pounds, you have probably 10% body fat or something like that, to 240 pounds all fat. Right. And it was a struggle for me to find the motivation to go to the gym. I think at one point, and that's something that, to be honest, I've struggled my whole career into the last couple of years, where I've really started to change my fitness journey a little bit. And we can get into like why that happened. But for me, it was definitely a struggle getting to the gym post college. And I just literally worked the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And then what was nutrition like? Was it still kind of seafood, eat food?
No, it was a little bit more tamed. Now, it wasn't like I did try to eat a little bit more healthy without like any science to it. More vegetables during the week, but then you would go on the weekends and typical like you would just binge eat and you eat and drink and so forth. So the food piece wasn't like it was before because I did start seeing my metabolism um really like start to go not be as fast as it used to be. Now, I would say there was periods where I would crash diet and then go to the gym for like 3 months, lose a bunch of weight, and then after that, stop doing that and then gain all that weight back right back. So I've had a lot of like I've gone up 40, I've gone down 40, and it's happened a number of times in the past 11 years.
Okay. So when you, what are you defining by a crash diet? What are kind of the things you would do to lose that weight?
So crash diet would be like pretty much removing any carbs that you had.
Yeah.
For sure, I didn't have I don't know how many calories I was consuming, but I guarantee you my daily caloric deficits was way under normal. And that would be pretty much it. So like I would wake up in the morning, maybe have some eggs, and no bread with maybe some meat. For lunch, it would be just like plain vegetables or like lettuce without dressing and some meat. And then that would be the same thing for dinner. And that was kind of my old school way of doing it. And that's actually how I somewhat dieted that one junior year that I told you about when I first started. But that was in essence what I consider to be a crash diet.
And so it obviously works, right? Crash dieting, you're basically restricting your calories and it works for a certain point. What was kind of, so you crash diet, you lose the weight, right? And I see this a lot when people reach a goal and they're like, what next, right? You lost the weight. And that period where you're losing weight, like a diet phase, a fat loss phase, or a strategic bulking or muscle gain phase. There's a phase in between called the maintenance phase, which now you know about.
Yep.
Right. And I think it's important to talk about that phase, but maybe where you were at in there. So you finish your diet, you hit your goal. Did you just kind of say, okay, I'm here, what next? So you go back to it and that's why you rebounded?
Well, to be honest, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
Like getting to your goal was so exhausting. It was just like I'm going to the gym and I hate being at the gym because I'm lifting these weights, but I'm exhausted getting through this. So at the end of these diets, I was just so mentally exhausted that I was just like, I just want to go back to normal. And then what that would mean is that now you go in from probably a massive, caloric deficit on a day-on-day basis to a massive surplus, right? It wasn't like that middle ground. And then on top of that, you're also like, oh my God, these past 3 months were so exhausting at the gym. Like, I don't think I want to go to the gym for a little bit. And let me take a 2-week break. But then that 2-week break, you go back and you go in for a day or two and you're like, okay, well, let me take another break. So that's kind of how that's what would happen to me. So I would be exhausted after a diet. So then, then at that point, your weight starts going up again. And then next thing you know, you're 6 months after your diet and the 40 pounds that you lost, you're now back 20 pounds up. And then it's kind of like that vicious cycle that at some point you're like, oh, well, I'm fat again. Pants getting tight. Now I got to go back to, dieting again. So you would do that and it would be over the course of a number of years and you're always fluctuating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely the more common method I see working with clients. It's tough because I get the appeal, but we'll go into kind of the new you and your kind of how you see the past 12 weeks have been, how diet fatigue is set in or it hasn't set in. All right. So now we're here. And what was kind of the catalyst because I've known you now for a couple of years.
Yeah.
We have mutual friends. We've met. What was the catalyst of like, okay, I need to get my shit together. I need to try something different.
Yeah. So I think, I have 2 kids now. So, I have a 4-year-old daughter and a soon to be 2-year-old daughter. And I'm obviously married as well. And for me, I think where it started happening is I started to realize that one, my weight kept like fluctuating, and I'm like, I don't understand how I can consistently keep this off. But the other piece was that I was always tired. So I remember when I first started working, like, yeah, it was hard, but I would take a week or two off, and then I'll be good for another 3 months, 4 months before I needed a vacation. This time around, I got to the point that I'm like, I just took a vacation, literally my first day of work, and I'm exhausted again. So I'm starting to see those things. And then, a few years ago, like you said, we have a mutual friend, so we went to a wedding. And then obviously we were all part of the wedding. So it's you, and a few of our mutual friends. And I started listening to you guys speak, and, and you guys are fit, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, man, I'm like the fat guy. You know what I mean? And then the other piece was we're at this place, and this is supposed to be a quote unquote vacation, and you guys are going to go do hill sprints for fun. So it was one of those things where it was kind of like a life-changing moment, because then you started talking about, hey, some of this stuff, it takes time, it's all about consistency and things like that. So that's somewhat where it first started. And then from there, what I started saying to myself was like, okay, well, I know there's a bunch of things that I have to do. My overall goal is I want to be fit, but I don't want to just be fit because I want to be fit. I want to be fit because I want to have energy to play with my kids. I want to have energy to be able to do the things that I love doing. But then on top of that, by me having more, this energy will also help me be more productive at work. But I said, this is just too much. And like you guys said, you got to break it down. And I think Dario, shout out to Dario from Origin. Check out his gym in San Francisco if you're ever there. But he gave me, he recommended this book called Compound Effect. And as a finance guy, the compound effect makes sense when it comes to finance. I never thought about actually applying that to life. And basically what it talks about is just, you start with one small thing, and then that one small thing is going to, balloon into a number of things. So that's, so I started listening to that book. So the wedding was in June. In the summertime, I just started listening to books, just really starting to educate myself. And I said, okay, well, now I want to start doing this. And for me, what I said to myself is two things. One, you're going to do things. The purpose of this is to really change your lifestyle, because everything else will fall in place. But then two, this has to be a learning experience. And I have to really learn throughout, which that then means is that I might do things that I will more than likely fail at. And I did. And for sure I did. But at the end of the day, if you're successful, this is going to be life-changing, and it's going to really change the way that your outlook goes. So that's kind of how it started. We can get into the journey, but that somewhat answers your questions of how things started and things started changing around.
Yeah, that's, when you said taking it as like a learning experience, I deal with clients all the time, and we always take these baby steps, but even hearing that, I'm like, I never really thought about it that way, right? Because obviously everyone wants success and they want it now, and being okay with that failure, because failing is still learning, right? Like, hey, we learned that, okay, maybe we messed up the macros this week. Let's adjust them. Like, that's just part of the process. Like, there's no way around that. And when you reframe it as like, it's a learning experience, I mean, there's like in investments, I've made bad investments. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all part of it.
Yeah, and what I would say is, and this is the thing, and obviously, like, the information that you've given me and your Instagram is like super helpful with your weekly like Q&As. Like, all of those things are amazing, and it's great information in there. But one of the things that also helped me change is like, why do I have to rush? Like, I'm gonna live another 60, 70 years. So if I fail for a couple of months, it's fine, because I have, God knows how many more months to eventually hit these goals. So that was a bit of a change in mindset. And then in terms of like after that, what I said is okay, there's a lot of things that are going on. And I'm listening to your Instagram, your podcast, talking about dieting, a lot of good tips in there. Like, for example, like you put me onto the RP Strength app, you talk about, programming, you talk about some of these other things, and a lot of information that was super helpful. But what I said is I gotta start. There's one thing I have to start at, right? I know dieting is a big component of this. And I absolutely recognize that I have to address it. But I said, you know what, but I have to start with going to the gym. And that's where I feel I will start getting my energy back. And then all of the body changes and all those things will happen once I get to my dieting component. So I started going to the gym. I started thinking about going to the gym. And then I looked back at my life and I said, okay, well, I've been to the gym before. I've tried all hours of the day. So I've tried doing it, before at 5 a.m. before I go to work. I've tried doing it after work. I've actually done it in the middle of my workday. So I said, where do I feel that I've been the most successful at trying to stay consistent going to the gym? And for me, that was during my workday. Now, again, I work in finance and it's a very fast-paced environment. So I had to figure out how to carve that into my workday. And what I did is I said, okay, well, maybe I'll start a little bit later, or maybe I'll start a little bit earlier, and then and end a little bit later. And then the way I started is I'm just gonna start going to the gym, but I'm gonna start with once a day for 30 minutes. That's how I'm gonna start my habit. I'm gonna go once a day from 30 minutes, and then that rolled into once a day for, twice a week for 30 minutes each time and so forth. And then that then ultimately built into me going, 4 or 5 times a week. So that's kind of, where things went. And then from there, once I had this cadence of going to the gym, the next piece that I looked to address was my programming, because I was, okay, well, I gotta figure out how to program. So that's where, again, listening, like reading books and things like that is super helpful. So I know, Mike Barbell put me on to Starting Strength, which was a great beginners programming book. So I did that for a few, and after a point I started hitting a cap, and then after that, I got into the dieting component, and then from there it just started getting us to where we're at today. And I can go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, there is a podcast episode by Nick Shaw, who's our Renaissance Periodization, who makes the RP Diet app. We'll kind of get into what that is. But he was with Dr. Mike Israetel on there, and they were talking, and they made an analogy of, if you're trying to climb Everest, because everyone's diet is like this unachievable mountain they're trying to climb, whether it's 20 pounds, 30, 100, 200, no matter how much it is, everyone views it as that's their mountain. What's interesting is if we said, hey, we're going to go climb this mountain and you are going to do it in 3 months, most sensible people would think, okay, I'm going to start for going for some walks. I'm going to maybe do a 3-mile hike and then, maybe a 5-mile hike. And they're just building their tolerance up so that they can take that big undertaking. But what happens in the diet world, which is weird, is that if we say I want to lose 30 pounds, instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to focus on losing 8 pounds. I'm going to lose 8 pounds. I'm going to keep it off for a couple of weeks, which you did, and then we'll see where we're at. Mm-hmm. Whereas other people, they just want to go straight to the top. And it just, no one's ever climbed a big mountain like that and survived, or bad things haven't had a recourse. So it's interesting to just to reiterate that, because you basically went through that. You saw this huge mountain to climb. You found, okay, how can I get 1 mile down the road? Well, you picked the low-hanging fruit, and then you just start building from there.
Yep. And then I mentioned earlier that there were things that I did that I knew I was going to fail at. So there was definitely things with working out, but dieting was one that I failed at a lot. So this is probably about a year into this journey. I go out to, hey, you got a good dieting book. You give me RP Strength, right? Or Renaissance Diet 2.0. And I'm reading this book, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm going to start reading this book. And I know it says for me to go slow, but you know what? Let me do a crash diet. Let me just see how it goes. I know I've experienced this.
Yeah.
But let me see how it goes.
Experience it with a little more science.
Yeah, with knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I get in, so I start doing the whole 30. And yeah, some people might say it's not crash diet. For me, anything that limits you, and there's only specific things that you can eat, that's a fab diet, crash diet, whatever you want to call it. So I did it for about a month and I lost 20 pounds. And I'm like, okay. But as I'm reading this book, I'm also being self-aware. I'm going to the gym and I'm tired again. And this is like, and this is, and I'm now starting to lift heavier weights and I'm exhausted when I go to the gym. Now, luckily, I built this gym habit that even if I was tired, I was going to always go. So I knew that, it was, so I learned that, okay, at that point, like, look, this doesn't work because you don't have energy to go to the gym. And even though you want to lose weight, you still need to have energy to go to the gym. And then after I finished reading the book, I said, okay, well, let's see how this goes. So I'm going to try to do, a pseudo, somewhat maintenance on my own and so forth. And, rightfully so. So I was done with, I was done with the diet at the end of February. By the time September came around, I was back to, the 20 pounds that I had lost. Mm-hmm. But it was a learning experience. And then at that point, that's where, I started talking to you a little bit more and starting to say, okay, man, now going into 2021, there's two things we got to do. Let's do some programming. Let's get a program, that will help me. And then two, let's start really using this RP diet app to help kind of improve on my dieting.
Yeah, and I think that as you were speaking, it sounds like you're not somebody who struggles with losing weight, right? There's people who struggle with just like losing weight and keeping it off. And then there's people who are actually pretty good with losing weight pretty quickly. Like, I mean, you lost 20 pounds, you've lost 40 pounds, like, how to lose weight. It's just that, I guess you're doing it in ways that are a little more extreme. Yeah. But the big thing, and then when we started is, listen, I'm not worried that you're not disciplined enough. Like, to lose 30 pounds or 40 pounds and the rate that you did, like, I know mentally you're just like willpower, like you're just going to get there, right? You're going to put your pedal to metal and just go, no regard for anything in the future, right? Mm-hmm. There is something, I guess, okay with that because I know you work hard. But when we met, it was like, listen, I want you to just try and lose 10 pounds, but the catch is we can only gain 1 or 2 back. Right. And I remember you were like, all right, 10 pounds. Okay, I guess I can do that. And I'm like, but we better not gain anything back. Right. And it seems simple, which, we'll see if it was simple on your end. But it's important to note that because I deal with so many people who have went down and up and down and up. And at some point, you got to be like, there's got to be a different way.
Yeah. Now, here's another thing that I also learned in this journey, too, which is still going and will still keep going. So I personally, in my head, prepared myself for failure and because I wanted it to be a learning experience. But what I also learned is that you got to talk, you got to do business with the people that know this stuff, right? Because at the end of the day, you can learn but so much. And at some point, you're going to tap out, right? Like, it just doesn't matter. And it started happening. Even in that 2-year journey, there was a couple of, like, where it somewhat started getting sad was when I called you and I was like, Mike, like, we got to figure this out. And you need it because, like, for sure, I know we're not done yet with, the 12-week program, but for sure, me looking at that program that you put together compared to the program that I makeshift put together night and day. Like, I told you this, and I told you this while I was working out. Like, I feel like I'm getting a workout in. I feel like not only I'm losing weight, but I'm getting stronger, but I also feel all around I'm becoming more fit and more healthy. Like, I remember, I would be working out last summer and, to go play baseball, and I had shoulder surgery and I would start throwing and I was working out 4 or 5 times a week and my shoulder would hurt. And I don't know why. And after this program, with me doing this, I'm back to playing baseball. My shoulder doesn't hurt. So, I learned that you sometimes need folks that have the background on this, and their help you're gonna be able to maximize your potential through that. And it's the same thing with the dieting component too. And at the end of the day, when you really think about it, it's not a crazy expense. And regardless, even if you see it as an expense, you should actually see it as an investment. Because for me, like, for example, since we started this journey, a couple of years ago, and I know, like, we've been doing more one-on-one coaching the past, 3 to 4 months. But to be honest, you've somewhat been my coach for 2 years. You just, you know what I mean? But, like, the amount of things that I've been able to get back, promotions, like, better performance in athletics, the better parents, like the whatever money you have to pay for it, the return on that investment is totally worth it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome to hear, man. And I think that's the hard part for people to starting out, right? Is to look forward because they're probably in a mindset of like they failed, they're sick of failing, they kind of, they're in a bad mental spot, and it's hard to look kind of outside of where you were at and be, hey, like you can be on the other side of this, right? And that's hopefully by hearing this, because you're obviously you've been up and down, you've been an athlete, and you've gained a bunch of weight. It's just a little more real of a story. So I hope people, when they hear this, they know that there is another way.
Yep.
And a lot of people succeed who are just like you. They work a job, they have kids, they have a family, so it's definitely an attainable thing. So let's talk about what happens. So now right? So you've done the crash diets, you've started working out. That's working out kind of was when we started. I'll call like I kind of have to pick like a backbone when I start with people. Like what is the thing I know that like they're gonna do and I don't have to really fight that battle. And for you, it was working out. Like I knew if I put it on paper and I gave you good advice and direction how to do it, you were gonna do it. Like there was no questions asked. This guy's going to the gym, so that was great, right? Then we talked about attrition. And at this point, you already read the Renaissance periodization stuff, so you were kind of aware of it. Obviously, we've been working together in the past, and I was a huge fan. If you guys aren't familiar with what that is, it's a mobile app. It's a coaching app, Renaissance periodization. It's the RP diet apps in the store. And it's not like a MyFitnessPal. I mean, a lot of people know MyFitnessPal. They count the calories, but this was definitely a macro tracker, so carbs, protein, fats, which inadvertently, when you do that, you'll still count calories in a sense. But I guess tell me.
By the way, I tried doing this on MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
And I failed miserably. Like the app was a total game changer.
Yeah, and it's it'd be cool to hear like kind of your couple main takeaways of like MyFitnessPal or Lose It or whatever, because those are all trackers. This is a tracker, but it's also like a planner, a coach. There's algorithms that will change week to week. So it's basically like having a human there. So what were kind of your main takeaways? Because you've obviously played both ends of it.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people live in that area.
Specifically like the diet approach or the app?
I guess a little bit of both. Because
okay.
Yeah. One just focuses on calories in general. Yeah.
So maybe let's do the differences between the two. What I would say is, so one, I think from the tracking mechanism, it's awesome, but they both track, right? Some of the game changer items I would say is I never thought about my weight in average, and I think the RP Strength diet does that extremely well. The RP app.
And so weight by average means, so when you stand on a scale today, say you're 200, and then 3 days from now you're 201, and then you do that over the course of 8 weeks, your weight's going to fluctuate, so it finds that mean average over time, right?
Exactly. So that was super helpful. And what was funny is even as I'm doing this, I say, okay, I know how I'm feeling today. I know my weight might probably be up, or I think I ate this yesterday. Like this is going to cause this.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely something that's super helpful. I also feel that once you put a goal, you put your weights on your weight on there and what you're trying to do. What's also super helpful is it spits out your macros and what they should look like, but then it breaks it up throughout your day, which for me was super beneficial. It says, okay, well, Cesar, how many times a day do you want to eat? I said 4 times a day. It shows you how things should be spit out throughout the day. Like, something like, for example, like post-workout meals, typically, I forget what the term is called, but you can, you should be having a few more carbs. I'm sure you know this.
Yeah.
And so forth, because of the state that your body's at post the workout. So it was super helpful for that. And it was simple too, because like I feel like in the MyFitnessPal app, I got to go find chicken, and then once I find chicken, I got to make sure it's the right one, and then kind of move from there. Where in the RP Strength app, you just put chicken breast, and then it helps you calculate. Now, obviously, with anything, it's an estimate, but then they're trying to take certain things into consideration. So that part was super helpful and super beneficial. And then the last part that I felt was helpful was exactly what you said, that it starts tracking your progress. So then every single week it makes recommendations and it tells you, well, look, you got to eat more, or you got to eat less, or repeat the previous week. So those were the three things that I found helpful from the app itself.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the actual like dieting journey, for me, first I had to get used to the fact that I'm not going to get on the scale one day and then see the scale drop 8 pounds in 3 days. Like that was the first thing that I had to get used to. But for me also, I know it, and I listen to the podcast, and I also listen to you as well. Like it talks about like hunger management. I feel like because I was hitting my right macros and I had the right amount of calories, I didn't have a hunger problem, right? Like I knew based off, once I got the calories to the right level that I needed to be at, I knew, because my meals were always spread out at the same time. I'm usually pretty good at that. I knew that these macros that I'm consuming right now, and I think my macros were like 45 to 50 grams of protein, like anywhere from 10 to 20 grams of fat, and then like 35 grams on like the non-post-op workout
like
meal.
per meal, yeah.
Per meal. But I knew that was just enough to get me to my next meal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then what was also great about it is that I also had enough energy when I would go into the gym that I wasn't exhausted. So, I would go into the gym, I would do a full-blown workout, I wasn't tired. Obviously, I felt like I had a good exercise in and so forth. So that was the other part that I felt was awesome. And I think part of that was because I started having this somewhat focus on macros, and the fact that I started now getting, I'm doing less fat, which I don't really care much for fat. I actually really like carbs. Like that's one of my things. But because I have more carbs in my diet now, like I have more energy to go work out. And then the other piece that was also somewhat motivating to me, and I think I sent you a couple of pictures, is I got to get to the gym because then I get a post-workout meal, which has tons of carbs in it.
Exactly.
So that was the great part about it. And, and it also, I think, through this journey, like it because you're seeing constant progress, and it's not like these 8 pounds or 10 pounds, you see like a pound or two. If you have a week where you come in and you're like a pound up or 2 pounds up, you're not worried about it because you're going to make it up. So that was super insightful. And then I've been on maintenance now for about a month afterwards. And, and my weight is pretty much stagnant. Like I'm probably up 1 or 2 pounds here and there. So when I get off this diet, not like other diets, I didn't go and binge eat. I didn't go and, go and get 4 pints of ice cream and have pizza the whole day. Like I just went back to somewhat normal eating, and even to the point that I'm probably going to still lose weight because my quote unquote maintenance is still, it's a lot of calories for me at least. Right.
Yeah.
But I still feel like I'm sustaining it, even post the diet. Now, here's another thing too, because of patience, and I've learned through this, is like, I'm still haven't hit my weight goal, right? Because we talked about whether my body scale was right or not. It said that I was at 22% body fat, and we want to get down to 15. And we knew that it was going to take us multiple kind of diets, cutting phases to get to that.
Yeah.
Now, I really wanted to continue because I was like, man, I'm doing so good on this cut. Let me just keep going. But I said, you know what? Like, this is a process. So I'm going to go into maintenance for the same amount of time, 3 months. And then hopefully some point in July or August, I go back to cutting.
Yeah. And I think so there's a good podcast, and I know we're plugging a lot of Renaissance Periodization just because like I'm a huge fan of them. I've been using their app for a while. I'm a huge advocate of it. But they did with the app, right? They have hundreds of thousands of users, and there was they shared some data from it, and they basically came down to like the most successful dieters, and success was, did they reach their goal or not? Was that like 6-week group? Then it was a very big like drop off, and then there was a next successful, which was like total weight loss, which obviously they were going for longer, was like the 12-week group.
Yep.
which basically you can take from that is like 6 weeks. If you've never dieted or you've struggled with it, just focus on like 6 weeks or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you know you're somebody who's done a couple 6 weeks, right? Maybe you've done a 6 and you're like, okay, I'm gonna extend it 2 or 3 more weeks. I'll go 8 to 9. You were good there. If you can push to that 12, you can have really good benefits. But a lot of people make the decision that they're just going to go 12 weeks right out of the gate. And that's kind of where you were at in the beginning. And I was like, hey, listen, like, I know you can lose weight in 12 weeks. That's not the issue. Yeah. You've shown it. The issue is I don't want to get to that same point where then you reach the end of your diet and you're like, I've been dieting for 12 weeks. My metabolism shit. I'm hungry. I can't work out. Screw it. I'm going to do this, right? Because as much as we all want to think we're strong and we're mentally tough, we have a finite amount of mental willpower and energy, right? And if you compound that with work, family, relationships, there's only so much you can put into your diet, right? So starting small like that's awesome. And now you've obviously learned, you're like, hey, I've done 6 weeks. I can do 6 weeks again. Okay, let's try 8 weeks next time.
Yeah, and then here's one thing that I would tell you too, the other thing is you're not going to be perfect with this thing. And that's the other great part about the app too, the fact that you see your adherence to it. So I was I want to say I was at a 92%.
Which is super awesome. Like anything in the 90s is awesome.
Which to me, I'm 100% guy. So I'm just like, oh.
I think most people when they diet, they want to be 100%, right? Mm-hmm. And it's, listen, I get very lean when I cut and I'm maybe 88 to 90. But it's because I'm taking my time, and if you take your time, you don't have to be perfect all the time.
Exactly.
You know,
and then what I was gonna say that. But then the other part about it, the flexibility. Yeah. I went over sometimes because I wanted to get a drink, or let's say I wanted to have a drink or a cocktail, and I can fit them within my quote unquote calories for the day, but I knew that I was gonna have less carbs or less fat because of that. So the flexibility of what you can do with it was another thing that I really enjoyed. But then you also yes, you are focused more on what you're eating, but you have so much flexibility and it doesn't stop your life because, you've shown in your Instagram, you've been cutting and you have a beer or you have a drink. Now, can you, we talked about, and you said, can you go and binge drink all day or binge eat all day? No. You got to make sure that you tame that. But there is that flexibility there. If you do have a craving for certain things that you can do it, but you have to make sure that it's minimal.
Yeah. And I think that's huge. And the drinking is I get the question, right? Because everyone's like, oh, how do I drink on this diet? And we had this discussion and, obviously you can't binge drink. However, the side note, I was out with our friend, Mike this past weekend and I'm in week 4 of the diet. I'm hitting my steam. I feel great. But it was a conscious decision. I'm like, listen, I'm here for 4 days. Did I get ripped crazy all the time? No, but we definitely drank and it kind of threw my macros off. But the great thing is that I'm not in a rush to lose this weight. I know as long as I'm headed in that weight direction, whether it's, 11 weeks, 12 weeks, or 13 weeks, I'm going to get there. So you allow yourself hey, listen, I'm going to, these 3 or 4 days, I'm going to get after it. And then I just will push that online out. And as long as you're trending, I think it's important. And then when you're looking at, how do you fit in alcohol? And we had this conversation was macros are like your budget. We never touch our protein. Protein is key. When we're trying to lose, I guess when I say losing weight, I really mean losing fat, right? There's a difference between weight loss and fat loss, right? If you lose 10 pounds, but 50% of that is fat, well, the other 50 is muscle and your body composition isn't going to change. Yep. So what we're doing with you is I want to lose 8 pounds and have 7 of that or so, or 6 of that be fat.
Yep.
So, when we look at that, we want to keep protein in there. We want to lift. If you have the macros to fit alcohol in, for example, a 200 calorie beer, what I would do is I would just take 40 grams of my carbs, which, 4 calories per carb, that's 160. And then I'd strip a couple fat from one of the meals and I'd insert my beer.
Yep.
Right? I mean, do I do it every day? Well, right now I might have a beer after dinner and I just have a salad and meat and I don't have my rice, right? Is it am I suggesting people to do that? No, but I mean, I don't think it's going to make a big difference. Now, at the later stages of my diet, I have to sit there and be like, do I want this double IPA or do I want this bowl of rice, right? And those are decisions you got to make. But most of the time, people don't get to that point in their diet just because they're not trying to diet so extreme, whereas I am. And I think it's important for you. You can have those drinks. You just got to budget them in.
Yeah, and what I would tell you is that is key, because the reason I feel that that's key, it's because it definitely helps with you not gaining all the weight when you're back and staying consistent. Because the fact is that in some diets, they don't let you do any of it. So when you're done with it, you're just like, holy hell, just give me half a gallon of Black Label so I can just down this thing. With this, I'm going to have it, but I'm just going to have a little bit of it because I still have this goal in mind. So my mind, like it helps me with my mind, right? So like, because all this stuff is mental too. So it's like, if I have a little bit of sense of normalcy, it'll help me cope with where I'm at. And then this way, when I get out of this, I'm not like trying to go crazy, trying to get as many things as I can. Like through this diet, I had bites of pizza. My daughters would get fries. I would have a couple of fries. Obviously it was all controlled, but it wasn't one of those things, especially me that's like this perfectionist, where I was like, oh, like I'm over here, I can't eat rice because I'm doing Whole30. I can only eat potatoes, and my wife is over here eating rice and beans. I'm not going to touch it. Like with this, there was so much flexibility that it definitely made it easy to get through it.
Yeah, and I think and whether you use the app or whatever you're using to track, the mindset and I agree with you. Like I understand the value that people will do the Whole30 or different plans like that. But when you start doing a diet where you exclude certain foods, right? Well, if somebody tells me I can't have something, I don't know about you, I'm typically the person where I'm like, well, screw that, I'm going to have that, right?
Yeah.
Or I don't want to be at the table where, we meet and you're having a drink and I'm, week 8 to my diet and I'm like, I can't have a drink, right? And it's like, well, cool, you have willpower, which is awesome, but is that one drink going to derail 8 weeks of hard work? It's like, if you have a drink or two, and I think the app really did a good job too, is like, if I know I'm going to meet up with you for dinner and I'm going to have 1 or 2 drinks because I know I have to drive home, whatever. Leading up to that meal, I'm going to make sure my macros are on point. I'm going to maybe work out prior, right? Maybe I will skim a little bit from each meal, maybe like 10 calorie or 10 grams of carbs from each meal so that I have a little bit bigger budget, right? And if I'm perfect for 4 meals and that 5th meal, I'm a little over, that's still an 80% day, which is great, right? Yeah. And I think what most people fall into the trap of is they'll say, oh, I'll just go crazy on Saturday night, which, okay, you do. But then Sunday they wake up and they're like, oh, I feel like crap, or I'll just start Monday. Yeah. And then Monday happens and they're like, oh, I had Monday. And then it just bleeds into Tuesday. Before you know it, it's just that cycle. So it's kind of like people are like, oh, I'll start tomorrow. It's like, no, let's start the next day. Because if you do only days, you only got 7 opportunities. Yep. 6 out of 7 days is I mean, I can't do math that quick, but that's not 80%, I don't think, right? And most people, it's like 5 out of 7, which is, Friday, Saturday, you're done. Mm-hmm. So if you have your meals, 4 meals a day, 7 days, you got 28 opportunities. Yeah, so I think that's the thing to really focus on.
Yep, for sure.
All right. So, you succeeded. You kept the weight off. And the maintenance. How will you describe your maintenance for people who don't know what that is? How would you describe it, like in your terms?
Yeah, and it'll be good to talk about programming for 5 minutes at some point too, right? Because I think that's been good. Like, I mean, maintenance, like, for me, it's just eating normal. Because I tell you, like my binge. Like I've never been this person that during the week I'm always having McDonald's or fried food all the time. So like for me, it's just being able to eat normal and my normal food again. So like in this diet, I was eating my normal food. It was just smaller portions of it, right? So instead of me having, and by the way, it's another thing I learned, like I barely have to weigh stuff now, because now I know a scoop is, whatever, 4 or 5 grams, like a spoon of rice is 4 or 5, ounces, and 2 spoons is 8 or whatever that is. But what I would say is like, it's just going back to normal and going back into just ensuring that I maintain a steady pace of the foods that I eat. Now, I do still make sure that I'm mindful of my weight. So that is something that I'm always like tracking, like just in case like I do start getting out of control. But for me, maintenance is just being normal again. And hey, like if I'm starting to feel a little bit hungry, which usually for me that doesn't happen because now I'm eating more, so I can I don't get hungry for a longer time, and I want to have potato chips that have 20 grams of carbs in them, and so be it, right? So maintenance has been actually pretty good, and it's good on your mind too because then you start doing these different things, and it's definitely a good resting component.
Yeah, that's basically what the purpose of the maintenance is. I guess first when you go down or when you go up, if you bulk, the same idea. That maintenance allows your body and the hormones and the metabolism to kind of reset, and it takes a couple of weeks, which is why people typically they lose a bunch of weight in the beginning and they gain it back, or they hit those diet plateaus. That's typically that body trying to figure that out, and it might take 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks depending how long you do it. The second benefit, which I think is just as important, is, and you hit nail on the head, was that maintenance phase, whatever your macros were at the end of your diet, you get maybe it's 200, 300, 400 calories more, which that's like a significant amount, but it's not going to push you back over that edge. You just got to hold there. And what that does, it allows you to have a little bit more freedom and flexibility back, that you can get your mental state back. You can say, hey, I think I'm ready to go at this again. Because, I'm not saying dieting's easy, right? But there will be a point when your diet's going to get it where you're going to really have to struggle. Like I know deep in my cuts, I mean, I'm always a little hungry and it sucks. But when you maintain that weight, you'll be able to then mentally prepare yourself for the next whatever case you want to be. So I think that's important that you're in that. All right. So programming. Let's talk about programming, and then I want to, because you have a question about, you're here and then you are actually going on vacation.
Yep.
And this is something that most people, always ask me in the gym.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. I think, look, programming is another component of it. And this is where I'll give you props. But like, it doesn't matter. Well, first of all, I think, especially being a former athlete that weightlifted, like, I think people need help. Like, and just figure out what that right number, like that right dollar figure is for yourself. Now, I also do think that there's things out there, and you and I spoke about this. Like, for example, for you, you have many different levels of your services that you're offering, and I think you just got to figure out how to make it work. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure for some of the costs, especially for some of your services, if you look at what you're doing, you can probably find money within your budget to afford it. And you have to think about it as this is an investment. This isn't a spend. This isn't a cost. Like, this is an investment that you're making that you will get back 10 times fold. So I think for programming, my one advice to folks is definitely get help and figure out what that right help for you is, whether it's you, like you said, like you need to have somebody be on there, or like you said about me, like maybe you just need somebody to write your program. I think programming is extremely important as well. Because one thing that I also learned with going with you is the programs that I did before, I overloaded way too much, and because I had so much overload, that also messes with your mind too, because then you start saying, oh, I'm so tired, like I don't think I want to go to the gym, and being able to have that program, that right program, that gives you the right, workload that makes you feel like you're working out, but doesn't make you feel like you're exhausted and you need like a 3-week break. I think that's extremely important. And I feel that that's something that folks should be doing. So for me, 2 investments: invest on your, whatever help you need for dieting, and then definitely invest on your programming, because both of them, having those 2 together, I think are extremely important. And I think it's a major thing of ensuring that you do this for the long haul and it's not just a short-term thing.
Yeah. And, when we talk about like the diet, right? So MyFitnessPal, I think it's free. And I get a lot of people when cause I have the RP diet, people that use the code here, they can get it for $10 a month.
Yep.
It was just cheap. I mean, that's like 2 coffees from Starbucks a month.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just so wild because I hear people sometimes they're like, well, why would I pay $10 for that when I can do this? And I'm like, guys, if I could snap my fingers right now and saying 12 weeks, $30, you're down 8 pounds, 10 pounds that you've always struggled to keep on and off. Most people would, yes. Right. So we know it works. So it's something where it's good that, because I can obviously tell people that, but it's good to hear you saying that, who's, been on that flip side and played both sides.
And then also look at, something that I tell people, like some of these folks look at their company benefits. Like, for example, like what I'm, going to pay, like what I've, invested in you and you've invested in me in terms of the program. As long as I go to gym 4 or 5 times a week for a 6-month span, I'm going to get that reimbursed from my company because of our insurance, right? So, but then you also have other things, like you said, your app is around that range too. It's like 10 to 20, whatever the hell it is, right? Like dollars, right? So like, and those are programs too. And that gets updated and you refresh it all the time. But it at least gives you some structure on what you're doing, right? You don't have to worry about that. Like somebody else worries about that for you. And then all you're really doing is just executing on it, and mentally that's a lot easier on you than having to do all of these other things.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's good to hear you had such a great experience.
You're the man, bro.
All right, so let's wrap it up real quick with talking about your upcoming trip. And you were asking me questions about how to attack that, getting ready for it. So I think it's going to be helpful.
So I think the one good thing about being on a cut is, man, like you're always like, especially towards the end of it, you're like, man, I'm starting to look good, right?
Yeah.
I think with maintenance, you do, even though my weight has been pretty even, like you can tell a little bit, like sometimes you might be a little bit more bloated, right? Because maybe you're eating foods that you haven't ate before and so forth.
And a lot of it's like water gain, like you said, bloating, water gain, or you're eating more food, there's a little more food sitting around in you. It's going to clear itself out in the first week.
Yeah, and then for me, and I think in an ideal state, if I would have planned this properly, I should have probably planned it that my diet was ending now, and then I went on to my vacation. But that being said, I was like, that's fine because I needed to start, so I started. So what I also know now is that I also know that in essence, your maintenance phase, the ideal scenario is that it's just as long as your cutting phase. Right. So it does not make sense for you to go cut for 3 months, right? Maintenance for a month and then go back to it. So I know that from a strategy perspective, that doing that sometimes increases your risk of not staying consistent. So the thing that I was asking you about was, well, man, what if I just do a 2-week mini cut and then I go on my vacation and then go back to maintenance? So that's I think one of the things that I'm trying to probably do for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so let's back up here. So you did a 12-week weight loss.
Yep.
And then you maintenance for how long?
4 weeks now. I think.
4 weeks. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, like you're right. The ratio, like anywhere from like the third to a half of the amount of the length of your diet plan is typically a good spot to have a maintenance. So you're right at that 4 to 6 week. Great. So now you're kind of in this like holding pattern. 2 weeks out, right? Like 2 weeks. You're most likely you'll probably lose some body fat, but most likely you're gonna push water out, right? You're gonna get rid of the bloating. Now, that being said, as quick as it goes, it's gonna be able to come back pretty quickly. So that's kind of the double-edged sword, right? But it's not like it's gonna reshoot you back up. So what I would do is like where your macros are at, and mini cuts, they can be a little more aggressive because we have a mini time frame to do it. Right. So in like this 2-week span, maybe it's like 3-4 pounds, maybe even 5. If we're counting, like you're probably going to lose some water, right? You're a bigger guy. So you losing 5 pounds isn't the same as somebody who's 120. So what I would do is wherever your macros are at now, or if you remember your macros from the last week of your diet, I would, like, do you remember what your macros were at week last week?
I think it was about 195 grams of protein.
Okay.
About 50 grams of fat. And dude, my carbs weren't crazy during my diet. But I think on a normal day, non-workout days, I was doing about 1 140 on carbs, and on workout days, it was probably like 170, 180.
Okay. So what I would do is, right, because you want to keep your protein high. You don't ever want to strip that down. You do have to have fat in your diet because like with hormone
and that was
production,
cutting, by the way. That's not maintenance.
Yeah. So that's great.
Yeah.
So I would really just touch the carbs, right? And this is where people like they go super low carb. Yeah, it works, but it will backfire if you stay in it for too long. So what I think, like if you went down to like the 110, 140, or like 120, 140, right? That's cutting out, on your workout days or non-workout, that's cutting out like 200 or 300 calories per day from the bottom of your last week of diet phase, right? So it's like a little more aggressive than your last week of the diet. I think if you did that, and then you could always see, okay, where are you at there after that first week? You could push it even more. The only catch is going to be when you go on vacation, right? Understand that like if you go back and you kind of come back to these maintenance level numbers, you'll be pretty good. Like you might gain slowly a little bit back over that week or however long you're going to be back to the maintenance. But if it turns into a free for all, right?
Yeah.
So what I would think, like when you're on the vacation, right? It's vacation, enjoy it, right? But you can still do little steps. Like you can still make sure you're staying hydrated, you can still have healthier meals throughout. If you're going to be drinking, you can, have fun, have your big meal. And the great thing is that you can't erase what you've accomplished in 16 weeks in 1 week.
Yeah.
It might feel like it when you get back, but just as quickly as you gain that weight, you're probably going to lose a lot of it when you come back from Mexico.
Yeah.
And the better thing is then now you've had your fun. Now we're going to go into another 8-week piece where we're going to progressively cut, right? And you're ready to go. And that's kind of why we can have this ebb and flow, right? Because over time, when we look back, a year from now or whatever, 6 months from now, your weight's kind of like this, but it's slowly trending down, right? Yep. And that's what's cool about the app is you can track that. So to recap, the next 2 weeks, I keep your exercise high. I would cut your calories, your carbs down maybe by like 30 to 50 a day based on the workout day, which will get you down about 150 to 200 calories. And then if you're finding it very difficult, like you're just always hungry there, you could also increase, like I know you're going to the gym a little more, but you could always just do like 15 minutes every day of like an incline walk and elliptical and just get a little more burn. But don't replace that burn with any food. Just kind of, that's extra bonus loss.
Yep, that makes sense.
So that's how I would attack it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then like, look, for me, I think this 2 week thing is just to help me break even after the vacation, right? Because like you said, I'll still lose it, but mentally, right? Like if I don't do this, I feel like I'll come back and be like, here we go. Yeah. I'm up again. So this would at least help me break even, And
I get like after New Year's, I was in a bulk phase. I had a 4-week mini cut because I had like a photo shoot coming up. And I understood like, listen, I'm going to lose weight very quickly. It was pretty aggressive. I lost like, I think 6 to 8 pounds in like 3.5 weeks. It was pretty difficult. And then I gained most of it back, but I was okay with it because I was like, listen, I know this isn't my main key focus here. So if people are listening to this, I'm not telling people to go out there and try and crash diet for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but if you do it, great. But just understand it's going to be a little bit of work coming back. But you've already built the habits of learning how to diet for 12 weeks. So now we're just going to do it again.
Yeah, man. Excited.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming out here. Guys, if you are at all interested in the app that we talked about or anything, you can go to rp.app/coach/JadeFit, save some cash on anything they got there. Anything you want to add?
No, man. I think, thank you, first of all. I think this has been a great journey. I think I definitely changed my lifestyle. I'm excited to see where we go from here because we're still in the middle of it, right? I'm actually looking forward to my first. I know people after a time don't like the bulking periods because you get tired of eating, but I'm kind of looking forward to the first time that I can bulk.
Yeah.
So super excited about what the future holds, and I think a lot of this is due to all of the good advice that you've given me. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being a part of it in my coaching journey, and thanks for jumping on. I was excited when you asked to do this because your story is super relatable to a lot of people, and it's one thing to hear me talk about it. It's another thing to hear somebody who's done it and isn't a trainer or somebody who can work out all the time do it and have the success you did. So
Sweet.
Cool, brother. All right. Well, go enjoy your Friday and 2 weeks, and then you're on vacation.